Here you see the Pirates taking the field up 2-0, just 3 outs away from finally getting over the hump to win the pennant after losing the last 2 NLCS. But as most fans know, this does not end well for them, and neither do the next 20 years. So let's look at how they got there and what went wrong in the decades after.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
Going into the 90s, things were looking up for the Pirates. They were far away from their glory days of the 70s that featured 6 division titles and 2 World Series titles in 71 and 79, going through the 80s without making the playoffs once, and nearly relocating to Denver. That coming in the mid-80s, as the Pirates finished in last 3 years in a row, naturally causing attendance to plummet amidst economic struggle in West Pennsylvania, and add on the Pittsburgh drug trials that included numerous current and former Pirates. And other players and even mascots were called to testify in front of a grand jury in relation to the cocaine problem in MLB locker rooms. So things were not looking good for the Pirates, but they were trending upwards with new ownership and a new manager in Jim Leyland in 1986. To go along with that, they had a number of exciting young players, including Jay Bell, Sid Bream, Jose Lynn, and what would be called the outfield of dreams with Bobby Bonilla, the newly acquired Andy Van Slyke, and Barry Bonds. 2 years after losing 104 games in 1985, they finished just 2 games under 500, and 1 year later they would win 85 games, 15 games back of the Mets, but they were still in a much better place. 89, however, would be riddled with injuries and an infamous game where they scored 10 runs in the first against the Phillies and lost. Pirates broadcaster said during the game if they blew the lead, he would walk home from Philly, and he actually delivered on his promise, completing the walk for charity after the season. And that allowed things to transition to the 90s, when the Pirates sniffed their way back to the top. 2 of the 3 members of the outfield of dreams would make the All-Star team, and Bobby Bonilla and Barry Bonds. And in the end, they would almost sweep the season awards. Jim Leyland would win Manager of the Year after leading his team to 95 wins, Doug Drabek would win Cy Young after winning 22 games with a 2.76 ERA, and Barry Bonds would have his first historic season, as he became the first player to ever hit 300 while driving in 100, scoring 100 runs, and stealing 50 bases. His 33 home runs also made him the second member of the 30-50 club. And of course, he won his first MVP. And for the first time since the 70s, the Pirates were in the playoffs. And they were going against a team they faced many times in the playoffs in the 70s, in the Reds, facing 4 times in the NLCS, with the Reds winning 3 of those. It had been so long since the Pirates made the playoffs that after splitting the first 2 games in Cincinnati, Game 3 in Pittsburgh had to be pushed back a day so the Steelers could play their scheduled game against the Chargers, giving the teams 2 scheduled off days for the first time in LCS history. And Game 3 would be a game where the Reds kicked 2 field goals, while the Pirates kicked only 1. And they did the same thing in Game 4 and 5. But only Game 5 saw them give up less than a field goal to the Reds, bringing things back to Cincinnati, 1 day behind schedule. And in Game 6, to counter the Reds platoon, Jim Leyland decided to start setup man Ted Power. And it worked, as the Reds were held to just 2 runs. But the Reds held the Pirates to just 1 run. As just like 3 times in the 70s, the Reds won the NLCS over the Pirates, this being their first pennant since 1976, as they went on to sweep the A's in the World Series. It was a disappointing end to the season, but it was a surprising success, and it didn't look like they were going anywhere. And that was the case, as there was never much of a race in the NL East, as just like their World Series winning 1979 season, they won 98 games, winning the division by 14 games. They didn't get those same player accolades, though they were close. John Smiley finished 3rd in Cy Young voting after tying Tom Glavine for the most wins at 20, and Barry Bonds missed out on back-to-back MVPs after finishing 2nd. And you can make a real argument that he deserved the MVP over Terry Pendleton. Bonds beats him in almost every category, with his league-leading on-base percentage as a result of his 107 walks to go along with his 43 stolen bases. I imagine this time, it was Pendleton's .319 batting average that made the difference, as Pendleton received just 2 more first-place votes than him. Regardless, they were off to the NLCS again with the best record, and they were going up against the team with the MVP and the Cy Young, and a team further east than them in the NL West winning Atlanta Braves. And great pitching would be the story of the series. The Pirates were the favorites in the series, going up against a team that went from worst to first in 1 season, and it looked that way when they won Game 1 convincingly over Tom Glavine 5-1. In Game 2, Zane Smith would pitch a gem, just like Drabek giving up just 1. But Steve Avery was better as he gave up 0, as Alejandro Pena would save the game to tie things at 1 and give the Braves their first playoff win in 10 playoff games, dating back to when they were in Milwaukee. And in Game 3, the Braves' bats came alive, scoring 10 runs in the game to give the Pirates' 20-game winner the loss. And Game 4 would see the great pitching return, in a game that was tied at 2 from the 5th on, as the Pirates took the lead in the 10th on a Mike LaValliere single to win 3-2 and tie the series. The Braves scored first in that game, and it would be a while until they scored again. As in Game 5, they scored 0 despite recording 9 hits, as the Pirates beat Glavine again with just 1 run. And it would be a repeat in Game 6. Steve Avery and Doug Drabek gave a preview of the World Series Game 7 still to come in a few weeks, both putting up zeros for the first 8. But after 26 innings without a run, the Braves finally came through in the 9th with a Greg Olson double as Pena would get his 3rd save of the series, in the 3rd 1-0 game. And it would be a rematch in Game 7 with the Johns on the mound again. And just like Game 3, the Braves got off to a quick start, scoring 3 in the 1st as Smiley didn't make it past the 1st. And that would seal the deal as John Smoltz would blank them, leaving the Pirates scoreless for the last 22 innings as they lost the NLCS in back-to-back years. For the Braves' first NLCS in Atlanta, as they would end up losing arguably the greatest World Series ever to the Twins in 7. Despite an even more disappointing ending, Pirates are still in good shape, being the favorites to win the division for the 3rd time. And they would start out strong, going 15-5 in April, but they would struggle in May, losing 17 games, before doing the opposite in June by winning 17 games, as Andy Van Slyke and Barry Bonds were starters on the All-Star team. And after a sluggish July, they called up rookie Tim Wakefield in August, and it would be huge for them down the stretch, starting 13 games, posting a 2.15 ERA with an 8-1 record to give him the Sporting News NL Rookie Pitcher of the Year, an award that hasn't been given out since 2003. And the Pirates would end up winning 22 of their last 30 to win the NL East by 9 games, winning their 3rd straight division title, also giving Jim Leyland his 2nd Manager of the Year award in 3 seasons. And just like his manager, Barry Bonds got an award for the 2nd time in 3 seasons. This time doing enough to top Terry Pendleton in MVP voting, as he led an OPS in WAR amongst position players, as Greg Maddux actually had a higher WAR than him. And it almost never happened with the Pirates, as before the season, Pirates GM Ted Simmons agreed to trade Bonds to the Braves for Alejandro Pena, Kevin Mitchell, and a player to be named later. But Jim Leyland stepped in to passionately oppose the trade that would be resigned. And if it had gone through and the records remained the same, then the Pirates would be facing the Braves and Bonds in the NLCS. But instead, he was on their side in a rematch last year. And Game 1 was similar to how last year's NLCS ended, as the Pirates had trouble scoring, not scoring off John Smoltz until the 8th, which ended a 30-inning playoff scoreless streak dating back to the previous year, with Smoltz being responsible for 16 of those innings. All the while, the Braves scored 5 runs off Doug Drabek to easily win Game 1, and the Pirates did score multiple runs in Game 2, 5 to be exact. What the problem was, those didn't come until the 7th and the 8th, while the Braves tacked on 13 runs to give the Pirates late season acquisition and Danny Jackson the loss as the Pirates are down 2-0. And going back to Pittsburgh, the Sporting News NL Rookie Pitcher of the Year and Tim Wakefield was on the mound in a huge Game 3, and he rose to the occasion. He gave up a home run to Sid Bream in the 4th, but in the 5th, 6th, and 7th, the Pirates scored 1 run off Tom Glavine, giving them the lead for good as Wakefield pitched a complete game, giving up 2 runs. Game 4 would see a pitching rematch Game 1, and the Pirates scored more off John Smoltz in the 2nd than they had in the previous 19 innings, that being 2 to tie the game. They scored 1 in the 3rd to give them the lead that lasted until the 5th, when David Justice drove in 2, and the Braves scored another 2 the next inning to put things out of reach, as they won 6-4 to put them 1 win away from a 2nd straight pennant. And down 3-1, the Pirates came out quick for 4 runs, and that was all Bob Walk would need, as he threw a complete game giving up just 1 to keep the Pirates alive. And spoiler alert, that would be the last time Three Rivers Stadium would see postseason baseball. But Game 6 would not be the last time Pirates fans saw postseason baseball on their TV that year, as the Pirates exploded for 8 runs in the 2nd off Tom Glavine, allowing Tim Wakefield to cruise to his 2nd complete game victory, as the Pirates matched the Braves from Game 2 by scoring 13 runs. And now, the Pirates are looking to be the first team to ever come back from a 3-1 deficit to win the NLCS. Only one team had come back from a 3-1 deficit in the ALCS, and that was the '85 Royals, doing so against the Blue Jays, who were coached by Bobby Cox. And for the 3rd time in the series, John Smoltz and Doug Drabek were on the mound, and the Pirates carried their momentum by scoring in the 1st with a sac fly. And an important out-of-nowhere moment took place in the 2nd, when umpire John McSherry became nauseous and dizzy. After being checked on, McSherry was removed from the game, and first base ump Randy Marsh took over behind the plate, shrinking the zone to showcase his authority. And Doug Drabek would work with that, as he saved his best for the last game of the year, as he continued to keep the Braves scoreless. The Pirates added another run in the 6th, but could not add an insurance run. They loaded the bases in the 7th, and Merced was thrown out of the plate in the 8th. And in the 9th, Jim Leyland made the decision to keep Drabek in by having him hit. He would strike out, and after McClendon was stranded at 3rd, the Pirates were up 2, 3 outs from finally getting to the World Series with a 92% chance to win. That went all the way down to 81% when the nerves skyrocketed when Terry Pendleton led off the inning with a double, and disaster looked to be inevitable when Jose Lynn, who received a Gold Glove that year, would make an error on a David Justice grounder, allowing Pendleton to go to 3rd. And then on 4 pitches, Drabek walked former Pirate Sid Bream to load the bases. And there, Leyland decided to take Drabek out of the game and bring in their closer Stan Bonilla, with Drabek responsible for all 3 runners. And at that point, the odds were 49-51 in the Pirates' favor. But things would shift towards the Pirates after Bonilla recorded a big first out with a Ron Gant lineout that drove in a run. and the incident in the second came back to be a big deal when Damon Berryhill walked on 5 pitches, and that 5th pitch appeared to be a strike, and would most likely be called one with McSherry behind the plate. But he wasn't there, and the bases were loaded again with the winning run at second, that being the slow-footed Sid Bream, who had been affected by numerous knee surgeries. Bobby Cox called for a pinch hitter in Brian Hunter, and Bonilla would get him to pop out, putting the Pirates 1 out away, and they still had reason to be confident, as up to the plate came Francisco Cabrera, who had played in just 17 games that season. Bonilla fell behind 2-0 before Cabrera lined a foul ball to left. And there, Andy Van Slyke in center called for Bonds to move in a little to make a potential play at the plate for the already slow-footed Bream easier, later saying that he didn't want to lose the game on a base hit. Bonds responded by giving him the middle finger, and naturally, Cabrera would hit a line drive to left. David Justice scored easily, while Bream came racing in with all he had. And noticing Bonds would have to make the deep throw across his body, Jimmy Williams decided to send Bream home. Bonds threw home, and the ball was a little to the right, allowing Bream to sneak in feet first, and give the Braves their second straight pennant. Ken Mercker would actually hurt himself during the celebration, as Francisco Cabrera had statistically the clutchest hit ever in a non-World Series game, adding 36.84% to the Braves' championship win probability. And that play remains the only play in a winner-take-all game where a team was losing and down to the last out, and ended up winning on that play. And after that play, Andy Van Slyke sat in center field motionless for several minutes, watching the Braves celebrate right in front of him, knowing that this was probably their last chance. And many Pirates fans felt his devastation, but little did they know the decades of devastation that would follow. After the Braves lost their second straight World Series to the Blue Jays, Doug Drabek and Barry Bonds would leave in free agency, Drabek going to the Astros, and Bonds going to the Giants, where he would win an MVP in his first year in San Francisco, and go on to win 4 more. And in the 1993 season, as the NL added new teams in the Rockies and the Marlins, the Pirates finished under 500 for the first time since '89, and that would be the start of a record number of losing seasons. And the biggest development for the Pirates going into '94 was their switch to the new NL Central. They were supposed to remain in the NL East, with either the Marlins or the Braves going to the Central, but the Braves wanted to form a natural rivalry with the Marlins, and the Pirates gave up their spot. The Pirates have attempted many times to go back to the East, but never did, as the Marlins and the Braves definitely became the most heated rivalry in sports. The highlight of the '93 season wasn't the team, but rather Three Rivers Stadium hosting the All-Star Game, with the representative being Pirates legend Carlos Garcia. And a month later, on August 11th, they beat the best team in the league in the Expos 4-0 at home to put their record at 53-61, and that would end up being their last game of the season as a result of the strike. It's easy to believe they would have won their last 48 games, but it's also easier to believe that that wouldn't have happened. And the following year was when it was more than clear that the hopes and dreams of the early 90s Pirates were gone. Some fans look back at the cursed beginning with Sid Bream sliding into home, while others feel it started on April 20th, 1995, when the Pirates released Tim Wakefield, who had struggled in the majors and the minors after his great rookie season. Wakefield, though not immediate, would eventually become a legend for the team he signed with in the Red Sox. And the real reason fans feel it all started here is that '95 season where they won just 58 games, just 5 more than the shortened '94 season. Granted, '95 was also shortened 16 games, but a last place finish was inevitable. And with the struggles not seen since the mid-'80s returning, the possibility of the team moving returned again. It obviously couldn't be to Denver, because the world's largest outdoor bar, where baseball is also played, was already set up. And after owning the Pirates for longer than expected, and having success, the Pittsburgh associates sold the team to a group of investors led by Kevin McClatchy. His plan was to build a new stadium to replace the old Three Rivers, and increase revenue. He also planned to cut payroll, and trade for prospects to build up the farm system. And after another last place finish, which was an improvement compared to '95, Jim Leyland did not want to go through another rebuild, and left despite his contract running until 2000. And he went to the Braves' massive rival in the Florida Marlins. And while they would all watch their old manager win his only World Series in '97, the Pirates had a great season, considering they had the lowest payroll in the league at $9 million. A team of rookies and low-cost veterans, known as the Freak Show, competed for the division with the Astros the entire year. Though they ended up finishing second at 79 and 83, it gave hope for the future. And though the public wasn't in support, funding for a new stadium for the Pirates and the Steelers was secured in '97, with construction set to finish in 2001. And while construction began down the road, the Pirates did not build on their surprising '97 season. With the Brewers joining the division, they finished behind them going 69 and 93. And Camp Bonifay knew the team needed to add excitement as they went into the new stadium, and they increased their payroll to $24 million in '99, signing a few free agents and trading for Brian Giles. And it was an improvement, a season that was almost identical to the '97 season, winning 78 games, except they were never really in competition with the Astros and the Reds for the division crown. And in their final season at Three Rivers Stadium, expectations were high, set by Kevin McClatchy, who forecasted the team to win 90 games, and instead, they lost 93. Not helping to build momentum as the team began play at a new stadium, as every time they seemed to build momentum, it would come crashing down. And as Three Rivers Stadium came crashing down, PNC Park was built. And from the first game played at PNC Park, it was noted for being one of the best parks in baseball, with its location next to the renamed Roberto Clemente Bridge, the city view, design, and the seating. And in this inaugural season, an average of 30,000 fans came out to experience the new beautiful park. And the only downside of going to the park was having to watch the Pirates. And as the Pirates sat 18 games under 500 halfway through July, Dave Littlefield took over as GM. And under the guide of Kevin McClatchy, he began a team overhaul to cut costs as the Pirates lost 93 games, just like they did in '98. And after another losing season in 2002, with some promising young talent, the real overhaul came the following year. As 2002 number 1 overall pick Brian Bullington made his way through the system and would end up being a bust, they gave up plenty at the trade deadline. They would trade Brian Lyon and Jeff Suppan to the Red Sox. They traded one of the bright spots over the past few years in Brian Giles to the Padres for Jason Bay and Oliver Perez. That would end up being a good trade in the short term, as Perez would lead the league in K per 9 in 2004, while Jason Bay would win Rookie of the Year that same year. But going along with the pessimism, they also sent Kenny Lofton and Aramis Ramirez to the Cubs for Jose Hernandez, Matt Brubeck, and Bobby Hill, a trade that was lopsided towards the Cubs. And the next few years would be much of the same. Young, uncompetitive teams with bad front office moves and cursed incidents, like Oliver Perez injuring himself by kicking a laundry cart, Ian Snell asking to be moved down to the minors, and a failed attempt at introducing a foot-tall camel mascot who at least didn't have a coke problem. They finished 5th or 6th every year from 2004 to 07, and 07 brought change to the organization. Robert Nutting replaced McClatchy as majority owner, while Neil Huntington became GM as John Russell became manager. And once again, they began a rebuild. They were big sellers at the 08 and 09 trade deadline, trading the likes of Jason Bay, Xavier Nady, Nate McLouth, Nigel Morgan, Eric Kinski, and more, while they gained players like Brandon Moss, Charlie Morton, Jeff Locke, and others. And when Adam LaRoche and Jack Wilson questioned these moves, they were both traded. And in the midst of these fire sales, 08 and 09 were 2 more last-place seasons. And their loss to the Cubs on September 7th in 2009 was historic for the wrong reasons, as that clinched their 17th straight losing season, the most for any franchise in North American sports. And it would somehow get worse, as the 18th losing season in 2010 brought the most losses since 1985, with 105. And that brought the end of John Russell as manager, and his replacement would be Clint Hurdle. And his first full season was one of the best in a long time. The Pirates were above 500 at the All-Star break, as they sent 3 players to the All-Star game, including Andrew McCutchen in his 3rd year. And while they were in first on July 18th, a little over a week later brought the famous call at the plate in the 19th inning. They won just 2 of their next 15, as they ended up finishing 4th with 72 wins. But they still had reason to be excited going into 2012, adding A.J. Burnett to the starting rotation. And again, they were first at the All-Star break, and on August 8th, they were 63-47, and that's when things turned south. They went 8-14 in August and 7-21 in September. And after getting no hit by Homer Bailey on September 28th, they secured another non-winning season, and their loss 2 days later secured their 20th straight losing season, as they became the only team to be 16 games over 500 with 2/3 of the season complete and finish with a losing record, as they finished with the same record as 97 at 79-83. And Pirates fans knew that they failed to capitalize on any momentum after 1997, but the difference here was the 97 team was incredibly young, and the front office now was more aggressive, adding Russell Martin and Mark Melanson, along with extending Jason Grilli and Francisco Liriano. And once again, they were battling for first place, and at the trade deadline, they added Marlon Byrd, John Buck, and Justin Morneau. Almost 2 months after 2011 number 1 overall pick, Garrett Cole debuted, who would add to the Pirates' pitching staff, as he would be named Rookie of the Month in September, which is the same month 20 years of being under 500 ended, as earlier in the month on September 3rd, the Pirates won their 81st game of the season. And funny enough, they lost their next 4 to freak out fans. But they would win their 82nd game on September 9th to officially give them their first winning season since 1992. And whether it was called the curse of Sid Bream, or Tim Wakefield, or hitting a sausage mascot with a bat, it was all over with the 82nd win that ended the worst losing season streak in American sports history. And the season was similar to both 90 and 92, as Clint Hurdle won Manager of the Year, and Andrew McCutchen would take home MVP, leading position players in WAR, as he won his second straight Silver Slugger. And not only did they have a winning season, they were also going to the playoffs thanks to playoff expansion that wasn't around the last time they were in the playoffs, putting them in the wildcard game against a team they played many times in the playoffs in the Reds. And a sweep of the Reds at the end of the season gave them home field advantage in the game, and the fans that waited decades showed up to the game wearing black, and they were loud. And one person who can assure this is Johnny Cueto, as after giving up a home run to Marlon Byrd, Pirates fans copied Lisa and Bart by yelling out Johnny's last name, and as he was wiping the ball with his hands, he dropped the ball, and the crowd got louder, and it somehow got even more loud when Russell Martin hit the next pitch over the left field wall, to put them up 2-0, as they would go on to win their first postseason game since Game 6 of the 1992 NLCS. In the NLDS, they went up against the Cardinals, and after splitting in St. Louis, they won Game 3. Putting them 1 win away from an NLCS appearance. But they would lose Game 4, and after electing to go with rookie Garrett Cole over AJ Burnett in Game 5, they would lose 6-1 to end the season. Still, their best season in decades. And just like that early 90s period, they would put together 2 more playoff seasons, and both ended the same. They won just 88 games in 2014, and got to host the wildcard game, but they went up against the early 2010 Giants in an even year, and would lose 8-0. And the next year would be when they wished they were back in the NL East, as their 98 wins would be the most since 91. But they still finished behind the Cardinals, and they went up against the Cubs in the wildcard game. And for a quick overview of that game, Sean Rodriguez would end up fighting a water cooler. And unfortunately, that would be the Pirates' most recent playoff appearance to date. They still had somewhat competitive seasons afterwards that ended with below 500 seasons except for 2018, which was the Pirates' last chance in that window. They traded Garrett Cole and Andrew McCutchen during the offseason, and after going on an 11-game win streak in July, they traded Tyler Glasnow, Shane Baz, and Austin Meadows for Chris Archer, and that trade would end up backfiring as most trades with the Rays do. Even though the Pirates had a winning season to prevent another streak from taking off, this was their last chance in their competitive window, as the following year will be the worst since 2010, and a year that they were expected to contend. As another rebuild began, as the list of Pirates traded since 2017 is hard to look at for Pirates fans. But the good news is it at least looks like the rebuild won't last for 20 years. The Pirates won 76 games in 2023, and while they probably aren't going to make the playoffs this year, they have exciting young talent like O'Neal Cruz, Ke'Bryan Hayes, Paul Skeens, and Rowdy Tellez. And at least the ghost of Sid Bream is 30 years away from fans at this point, and during those 20 years of pain after, as the most recent horrendous play at the plate involving the Pirates came just 4 years ago.